My name is Evelyn, and I never thought one Christmas season would change my whole life. I had been married to Mark for 9 years, and in all that time I believed we had something steady and safe. Our home was simple, our life was quiet, and our hearts were supposed to be on the same path. Or at least I thought so. It all started on a cold December afternoon when I came home from work with a small box of gingerbread cookies for us to share. The house smelled like pine from the new tree I had decorated the night before. I wanted us to enjoy the holidays like every other year with soft lights, peaceful nights, and warm memories. But as soon as I stepped into the kitchen, I knew something was off. Mark was sitting at the table holding his phone with a stiff look on his face. He did not look up when I entered, and that alone felt strange. Usually he greeted me with a smile or a soft joke. This time he just cleared his throat and said he needed to talk. Those words always make the heart freeze a little. I sat down and waited. Mark took a deep breath and then spoke in a tone that felt too calm, too controlled. He said that his ex Claire would be joining us for Christmas dinner this year. At first I did not fully understand. I thought maybe he was joking, or maybe she needed a place to go because of something serious. But he kept talking as if nothing about this idea was unusual. He said she would be lonely and that it would be the right thing to do. He said it like it was already decided, like he had the right to choose without asking me. I stared at him stunned. My chest felt tight. I asked him why she, of all people, had to come to our home on a family holiday. And that is when he said something that hurt more than anything he had said before. He said I was being dramatic. He said it was not a big deal. He said I needed to be more understanding. He spoke to me like my feelings were small, like I was small. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I felt the weight of all the times I had bitten my tongue to keep the peace, all the times I had stepped aside so he could feel comfortable, all the times I had put my heart behind his without even noticing. I asked him how long he had been talking to her. The way he avoided my eyes told me more than his words ever could. He said they had reconnected a few months ago online, and he thought it was harmless. He said she had been going through a rough time. He said he was just trying to be a good person. But the truth I felt deep inside was that he had been doing something behind my back, and he did not care how it made me feel. My hands shook under the table, but I kept my voice steady. I told him I deserved honesty. I told him this was disrespectful. But Mark brushed it off like I was making noise over nothing. Like I was not the woman who had stood by him through sickness, through job losses, through storms of every kind. I went upstairs after that conversation with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat on the edge of our bed staring at the Christmas lights I had carefully hung around the window. Each light glowed softly, but instead of feeling warmth, I felt a pain that reached deep into my bones. I remembered the early years when he held my hand, when he asked for my advice, when he laughed with me like I was his safe place. I remembered how proud I felt when we built our life together. I remembered the dreams we talked about, the family we hoped to have, and the small promises that now felt broken. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire sitting at our table, smiling at my husband, like she still had a place in his life. The thought sliced through me. I asked myself if I had done something wrong, if I had become boring or invisible or too tired from work to sparkle anymore. But deep down, I knew this was not about me failing. It was about him forgetting who I was to him. The next morning, I woke up feeling heavy but also strangely clear. A voice inside me whispered, "You matter. Your heart matters. Your dignity matters." And in that moment, I knew I had to stand up for myself, even if my voice shook, even if the truth hurt, even if Christmas looked different this year. I walked downstairs and found him in the living room pouring coffee like nothing had happened. He looked at me and gave a half smile like he expected everything to go back to normal. But I was not the same woman I had been the day before. I told him calmly that if he wanted her to be part of his holiday, then he would spend it without me. The words surprised even me, but once they left my mouth, I felt stronger. It was like I had finally opened the door I had been afraid to touch for years. Mark looked shocked. He said I was overreacting. He said Claire was not a threat. He said he did not want to fight. But I stood firm because for the first time in a long time I was standing for myself. I walked out onto the porch, breathing in the cold winter air. The sky was pale and the air crisp, and for the first time in many months I felt something like freedom. I did not know what would come next. I did not know how painful the next steps would be. But I did know one thing. I was done letting myself shrink for someone who did not see my worth. Little did I know the days ahead would reveal truths I never imagined. And the moment he spoke those careless words about Claire would turn into a storm that would shake our whole marriage from the ground up. But it would also lead me toward a strength I never knew I had, toward a choice that would show me who I really was, toward a Christmas that would change everything. I spent most of that morning sitting in my car outside the small-town bakery where I worked part-time. The engine was off and the cold air wrapped around me like a quiet warning. I watched people walk in and out, carrying treats for the holidays, laughing and chatting and planning their cheerful evenings. I wondered how many of them had ever sat in their car, trying to understand how everything in their life shifted in a single night. I kept replaying the words Mark had spoken like a broken song stuck in my head. He wanted his ex to sit at our Christmas table. The same table where we had shared our first anniversary dinner. The same table where we held each other after his father passed away. The same table where we had once dreamed about a family of our own. My heart kept twisting with each memory. I finally walked inside the bakery, and the warmth of the ovens brushed against my face. My friend and co-worker Helen took one look at me and knew something was wrong. She had known me for years, and she could read my spirit without me saying much. I told her what happened in a soft voice because I did not want anyone else to hear. I felt embarrassed even though I knew I should not feel that way. Helen shook her head slowly and placed a gentle hand on my arm. She said that a marriage should never make a woman feel small. She said kindness in a partner is not a gift, but a requirement. Her words settled into my chest like a small light in a dark room. I held on to that light with everything I had. During my break, I stepped outside again and looked up at the sky. It was gray and heavy, like it might snow soon. The world kept moving around me, but inside I felt still, like I was standing in the middle of a storm that had not yet touched the ground. I knew I needed to talk to Mark again, but I also knew I needed to gather my thoughts first. I drove home after work and found the house quiet. The lights on the Christmas tree glowed softly, filling the room with a warm shimmer. But instead of bringing comfort, they reminded me of how much I had invested in making our home feel special. I had hung stockings, placed candles, and wrapped gifts with care. I had done all of it with the hope of making this Christmas sweet for us. And now everything felt different. Mark came downstairs a moment later, rubbing his eyes like he had been napping. He tried to speak in a gentle tone, but I could tell he was frustrated. He asked if I had calmed down like I was a child having a tantrum. Those words pushed something sharp into my chest. I was not calm, but I was not out of control either. I was hurt, and I had a right to be. I told him again that inviting his ex into our home on Christmas was disrespectful. I told him it crossed a boundary no partner should cross. Instead of listening, he tried to justify it again. He said he felt sorry for her. He said she was going through a lonely time. He said it was just one holiday. He said I was looking for problems where there were none. The more he talked, the more I realized he was not hearing me at all. He was defending her feelings but ignoring mine. And that was the moment my heart cracked in a different way. It was not only the invitation that hurt, it was the way he had chosen her emotions over mine. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, breathing deeply. I could feel tears building behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not this time. I asked him plainly if anything else had been going on between them. He hesitated for just a second, but that second told me everything. That hesitation hit me like a cold wave. He said again that they were only talking. But he said it too fast, too shaky. My instincts whispered that the truth was hiding behind those weak words. I told him I needed space. Not a little space, not a few minutes, but real space. He looked stunned, like he had not expected me to stand firm. I told him I would stay at my sister Jolene's house for a few days. He said that was unnecessary. He said we should just talk it out. But I knew talking would not fix the damage that had already been done. I packed a small bag and called Jolene. She told me to come right over. When I arrived, she hugged me tight and said she had a pot of warm soup ready. Her house felt safe and steady, like a soft blanket after a cold walk. I needed that kind of comfort more than I realized. Later that night, we sat at her dining table sipping soup while her little dog curled at my feet. I told her everything, every word, every detail, every hurt. Jolene listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed deeply and shook her head. She said a husband should protect his wife's heart, not hand it over to someone else. She said I had been carrying too much weight alone. She said love should not leave bruises on the soul. I went to bed in her guest room feeling both broken and strangely relieved. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit that something had been wrong in my marriage long before this Christmas. I had been making excuses for his detachment, for his mood swings, for his sudden silences. I kept hoping he would come back to the version of himself I had fallen in love with. But love cannot survive on hope alone. I stared at the ceiling and wondered what Claire meant to him now. I wondered why he had not chosen me. I wondered how many signs I had ignored. But most of all, I wondered how much longer I could keep hurting myself just to keep the peace. In the quiet of that room with snow starting to fall outside the window, I whispered a truth I had avoided for years. I deserved better. I deserved respect. I deserved to be loved in the open, not in the shadows of someone else's presence. But I had no idea that the worst truth, the heaviest truth, was still waiting for me. A truth that would break my heart before it made me stronger. A truth that would turn this Christmas into the most defining moment of my life, and the first sign of that truth would arrive the very next morning. The next morning, I woke up in Jolene's guest room to the soft sound of snow tapping against the window. The world outside looked still and quiet, like a blanket of white sadness had covered everything. I sat up slowly, feeling the weight of yesterday pressing against my chest. My mind was foggy, but my heart was loud. I knew something inside me was shifting, even if I did not fully understand it yet. Jolene was already in the kitchen making breakfast when I walked downstairs. She had a pot of oatmeal on the stove, and the scent of cinnamon filled the air. She smiled at me in that gentle sister way, like she wanted to wrap me in comfort without asking too many questions. I sat at the table and held the warm mug she placed in front of me, letting the heat steady my hands. She finally asked if I had heard from Mark. I shook my head. I half expected a text or call something, but my phone had been silent. That silence hurt more than any argument. Silence from someone who claims to love you speaks louder than angry words. It tells you exactly where you stand. After breakfast, I stepped outside with Jolene's dog for a short walk. The snow crunched softly beneath my boots, and the cold air brushed my cheeks. As I walked, I thought about the years I had spent trying to hold my marriage together. I thought about all the times I tried to make things easier for Mark, even when I was tired, drained, or hurting. I had poured so much of myself into us that I could not even recognize where my own needs began anymore. When I came back inside, there was a message on my phone from Mark. Only a few short words, but they made my stomach twist. He wrote that he needed to talk and that I was blowing things out of proportion. That was it. No apology, no warmth, no understanding. Just blame wrapped in cold letters. I did not respond. Instead, I placed the phone on the counter and took a long breath. I would not let him pull me back into the same pattern where he talked and I shrank. Not today, not anymore. Later that afternoon, I received another message, but this time it was not from Mark. It was from a number I did not recognize. My heart jumped a little when I opened it. It was Claire. Seeing her name made my hands tremble. I had no idea how she got my number. She wrote that she wanted to clear the air and hoped I was willing to talk. She said she did not want to be the cause of tension. She said she respected me. But something about her message felt too polished, too gentle. It felt like a mask. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to reply. Jolene saw the look on my face and asked what happened. I handed her the phone and watched as her eyes narrowed. She shook her head and said not to trust it. She said a woman who steps into a marriage does not get to play innocent. She said this message was a warning, not a peace offering. I took her advice and did not reply, but the message stayed in my mind like a heavy shadow. Why did she feel the need to reach out to me directly? Why now? What was she trying to tell me or hide from me? Hours passed and the sun dipped behind the gray clouds, leaving the sky dim. I was folding blankets in the guest room when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a message, and it was Mark. I stared at his name glowing on the screen for several long seconds before answering. His voice came through rushed and irritated, like he had been waiting for me to respond. He asked why I left. He said this whole situation was exhausting. He said I was making him look bad. Each word felt like a small sting. I tried to stay calm. I told him I left because I needed to protect my heart. He scoffed like the very idea sounded silly to him. He said he did nothing wrong. He said he only invited her because he felt sorry for her. He kept talking about her pain while ignoring mine, just like before, and then he slipped. He said something he did not mean to reveal. He told me he could not just abandon someone he once cared about. His voice cracked ever so slightly on the word once. And that was when the truth began to shine through the cracks. He still cared. Or maybe he cared again. Either way, he cared enough to hurt me for her. My stomach dropped as the final puzzle pieces fell into place. I asked him in a low, steady voice if he had feelings for her again. He grew defensive right away. He said I was imagining things. He said I was insecure. He said I was twisting his words. But that crack in his voice told the real story. I ended the call before he could talk me in circles again. I sat down on the bed, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. The truth felt heavy but also strangely liberating. If he had feelings for her, then nothing I had done could have changed this outcome. It was never my failure. It was his choice, his weakness, his betrayal. But the storm was not over. In fact, a larger truth was already on its way to me, and it would arrive from an unexpected source. Someone who knew more about Mark and Claire than I ever imagined. That evening, while Jolene watched a holiday movie, I stepped outside alone. The air was freezing and the snow had turned into a soft, steady fall. I looked up at the sky and let the flakes land on my face. They melted into small drops sliding down my cheeks almost like tears. I whispered to myself again that I deserved better. Saying it out loud made me realize how long I had gone without believing it. When I went back inside, my phone buzzed with another message. This time it was from Claire again. But the words were different, sharper. She wrote that she was sorry things were awkward. But she also wrote something that made my blood turn cold. She said she hoped Mark had already explained everything to me, everything. That one word echoed through my mind. Everything about what? What had they shared that I did not know? Before I could respond, another message came through. Short, direct, she wrote that I deserved to know the full truth. And then she said she wanted to meet me in person. The air around me felt thick. My heart thudded deep in my chest. I stared at the screen, unable to move for a moment. Jolene saw the look on my face and hurried over. When she read the messages, her eyes widened with worry. She said this could be a trap. She said I should block her. But a strange calm settled over me, a quiet strength I had not felt in years. I told Jolene I needed to know the truth, all of it, because if I did not face it now, I would carry this pain forever. I had no idea what Claire wanted to tell me, but deep inside I knew it would change everything, and I was ready for the truth, ready for the storm, ready to stand tall even if my heart shook, because some truths are heavy, but they also set you free. I barely slept that night. My mind kept spinning around Claire's message. The word everything echoed in my thoughts until it felt like a drumbeat in my chest. I kept asking myself what she meant and why she felt the need to warn me. The snow outside thickened through the night, and by morning the whole neighborhood looked buried in cold white silence. Jolene knocked softly on the door as the first light began to rise. She asked if I was sure I wanted to meet Claire. I told her yes. My voice did not shake. For the first time in years, I felt my strength like a quiet fire inside me. I needed answers, and I needed the truth spoken directly to my face. I was tired of living in fog and half-truths. I got dressed slowly and stepped into the living room. Jolene poured me a cup of coffee and told me she would drive me if the roads were too icy. But I told her I needed to go alone. Something deep in my spirit said this was a moment I had to face by myself, a moment that would define what came next in my life. Claire wanted to meet at a small diner on the edge of town, a place I rarely visited. When I pulled into the parking lot, the sky was still gray and heavy. The diner windows glowed with warm yellow light. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my breath. Then I stepped out and walked inside. Claire was already there, sitting in a booth near the back. She looked smaller than the woman I had imagined from Mark's stories. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes looked tired, as if she had been carrying her own storm for far too long. She gave a small, polite smile when she saw me, but I could tell she was nervous. I sat down across from her. The air felt thick with unspoken truths. A waitress asked if I wanted anything, but I shook my head. My stomach was in knots. Claire spoke first. Her voice was soft but steady. She said she did not want to fight. She said she respected me more than I knew. She said she thought meeting face to face was the only way to be honest. I listened quietly, waiting for her to reach the point. Then she took a slow breath and told me something that made my hands go cold. She said she and Mark had been talking long before he admitted it to me. Not just casual messages, not just friendly check-ins, long, deep conversations, private calls, emotional talks. She said she tried to cut things off several times, but he kept reaching out. My heart sank. It hurt to hear her say it aloud, even though some part of me already suspected it. But she was not done. She said Mark had told her he felt trapped, that he was unhappy, that he missed what they once had. She said he spoke about me like I was holding him back, like I was the reason for his stress. Each word felt like a sharp needle pressing into my skin. I kept my face still, but inside I felt something crumbling. I asked her if they had been physically involved. She shook her head quickly and said no. She said he had tried to visit her once, but she told him it was not right. She said she did not want to break a marriage. She said she only kept talking to him because he made her feel needed during a weak time in her life. I did not know whether to believe every word, but the pain in her eyes looked real, and the shame on her face looked deep. She said the reason she reached out to me was because she could see Mark was spiraling. She said he was using her attention as a distraction from his own problems. She said he was lost and blaming everyone around him. She said she refused to be part of it anymore. Then she said something I never expected. She said he had told her that he planned to talk to me after Christmas, that he wanted space, that he was unsure about our marriage. That was the moment my breath caught in my throat. I stared at the table, trying to swallow the weight of her words. All this time I had been trying to save something that he was already planning to let go of. All this time I had been fighting alone. Claire reached across the table and placed a folded piece of paper in front of me. She said it was a message he had sent her a few weeks ago, something she thought I deserved to see. She said she debated whether to show it to me, and she knew it would hurt, but she believed I needed the full truth before making any choices. With trembling hands I opened the note. It was a printed screenshot. Mark's words were right there on the page in plain black letters. He had written that he missed her energy. He had written that he did not feel seen at home. He had written that part of him wondered what life would be like if he and Claire had never broken up. He had written that he wanted a fresh start after the holidays. The letters blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I placed the paper down slowly. I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me, but at the same time I felt strangely clear. The truth, no matter how painful, has a way of sharpening everything. It shows you what is real, what is broken, and what cannot be repaired. Claire whispered that she was truly sorry. I nodded because in that moment I realized something important. She was not the enemy. She was not the one who betrayed the vows. She was caught in the same confusion I was. The true betrayal came from the man who was supposed to protect me. I thanked her for telling me the truth. My voice barely rose above a whisper. She looked relieved but also sad. I stood up slowly, gathering what little strength I had left. I told her I hoped she healed from her own pain as well. She nodded and wished me peace. When I walked out of the diner, the cold air hit me hard. Snowflakes brushed against my face and melted instantly. I felt hollow and heavy at the same time, but deep inside a small spark flickered, a spark that whispered the truth was finally mine. I drove back to Jolene's house in silence. When I walked inside, she could tell from my face that the truth had not been gentle. She wrapped her arms around me and I finally let the tears fall. Tears of hurt, tears of anger, tears of release. But underneath all of that, something else was forming. Strength, quiet strength, the kind that grows in broken places. That evening, as I sat near the window watching the snow fall, I realized something important. I had a choice to make, a choice that would shape the rest of my life. A choice between staying in a marriage built on crumbs or walking toward a future where my worth was not questioned, and I knew this decision would have to be made before Christmas. Because Christmas would not be the same this year. It would not be defined by decorations or dinner plans. It would be defined by truth, and I was finally ready to face it. Finally ready to speak my heart. Finally ready to take the next step, even if it meant letting go. The night after meeting Claire felt longer than any night I could remember. I lay awake in Jolene's guest room, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the ticking of the hallway clock. Each sound felt too loud in the quiet of my thoughts. My heart kept replaying every word Claire had said. Every truth she revealed felt like a blow to my spirit, but also like a door opening inside me. Painful, yes, but freeing too. Mark had already chosen a different path even before I knew there was a fork in the road. He had been speaking about me to another woman, saying things I never imagined he would say. I had been holding on to us with both hands while he had already loosened his grip. It hurt deeply, but it also made something inside me stand taller. By morning, the snow had stopped and the world outside sparkled under the pale winter sun. Jolene made pancakes and kept the conversation light until I was ready to speak. Finally, I told her everything Claire had shared. Jolene listened quietly, though I could see fire flickering in her eyes. She wanted to protect me. She always had. When I finished, she squeezed my hand and said something simple but powerful. She said, "This is not your shame. This is your clarity." Those words settled in my heart like warm tea on a freezing morning. After breakfast, I stepped outside for fresh air. The cold was sharp, but it woke up my senses. I walked slowly along the sidewalk, letting the snow crunch beneath my boots. Each step felt like I was walking closer to my own truth. I needed to confront Mark. I needed to hear his voice when I showed him the printed message. I needed to see if he would tell the truth or bury himself deeper in lies. I drove back home around midday. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as the house came into view. It looked the same as always, with the wreath on the door and the glow of the tree lights shining softly through the window. But it no longer felt like home. It felt like a place where my heart had been bruised again and again. When I walked inside, Mark was sitting on the couch staring at the television, though he was not really watching it. He stood up quickly when he saw me, like he had been waiting. His eyes held a mix of relief and irritation. That alone told me enough about where his priorities were. He started talking fast, saying we needed to stop acting childish. He said Christmas was days away and we needed to get back to normal. The word normal sounded hollow. There was nothing normal about the way he had broken my trust. I told him I met with Claire. The color drained from his face. He tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand slightly and told him to let me speak. My voice was steady, strong. I told him she showed me the message he wrote about wanting a fresh start after the holidays. I placed the printed screenshot on the coffee table. He looked at it like it was a knife aimed at him. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes darted away. His shoulders sagged. That was when I knew the truth. He had no real defense, because the truth was written in his own words. Finally, he whispered that he had been confused. He said he felt lost. He said he never meant to hurt me. But none of his excuses touched the real issue. He had chosen someone else emotionally. He had chosen to open his heart to another woman, while I stood unknowingly in the background. I told him the hardest truth I had ever spoken. I said I loved him, but I loved myself too. I said I would not live in a marriage where I was an afterthought. I said I needed honesty and respect, and he had given me neither. His voice grew desperate. He said we could fix things. He said he would block Claire. He said he would be better. But the more he spoke, the more I realized he was trying to save his comfort, not our marriage. He was afraid of losing what he took for granted. I looked at him and saw a man who had once been kind and gentle, but now stood confused by his own choices. A man who had forgotten how to love with loyalty. A man who had lost his way long before I found the strength to see it. I told him I was leaving for now. I said I needed time to decide what my life should look like without lies. He tried to stop me, but I walked past him with calm steps. My heart was heavy but steady. I packed a few more things and headed back toward the front door. Before I left, I looked around the living room, taking in the memories held in that space. The nights we laughed, the days we cried, the moments we shared as a team. But those memories were now mixed with something darker, something I could not live with anymore. Mark stood there with pleading eyes, but I did not turn back. I walked out into the cold air and let the wind wash over me. The sky was bright and the snow glistened like tiny crystals under the sun. For the first time I felt the weight lift from my chest. Not fully, but enough to breathe. When I reached Jolene's house, she hugged me again, and this time I did not break. I stood firm in her arms, like someone who finally understood her own worth. That evening we wrapped ourselves in blankets and watched the lights on her small tree flicker softly. I held a warm cup of tea and felt a quiet peace growing inside me, a peace I had not felt in many years. I knew the days ahead would be difficult. I knew there would be moments of doubt and pain, but I also knew this truth. I was stronger than I thought, strong enough to walk away from the shadows, strong enough to choose myself, strong enough to rebuild. Christmas was only days away now, and instead of dreading it, I felt a strange sense of calm. Because this year, Christmas would not be about saving a broken marriage. It would be about saving myself. But the story was far from over, and the next turn in the road would bring a moment I never saw coming, a moment that would test my courage in a way I had never been tested before, a moment that would show me just how brave a woman can be when her heart finally decides to rise. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The sky outside had turned dark and the cold winter air pressed against the windows. The heater hummed gently, but it could not stop the tight feeling in my chest. I kept replaying the moment in the diner when I finally stood up for myself. The moment I told Mark the truth, that he had crushed me for years without even trying to understand what kind of woman stayed by his side. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked so still. It was strange how a home could hold both memories and heartbreak in the same walls. I walked up the porch steps slowly and unlocked the door. Everything inside was the way we had left it earlier that morning. The tree lights twinkled softly, and the ornaments hung without making a single sound. For the first time, that silence felt peaceful, maybe even necessary. I sat on the couch and let myself breathe. Not the shaky breath of someone surviving, a real breath, deep, steady, and honest. I whispered a little thank you to myself because I had not given up even when I felt like the world was falling apart under my feet. After about an hour, I heard the front door open. Mark walked inside with his shoulders slumped. He looked different, smaller somehow. He shut the door behind him and stood there as if he was afraid to come closer. He finally said my name softly. I said yes. He walked toward me slowly and sat in the armchair across from me. He did not reach out. He did not try to explain right away. He just looked at me like he finally understood something he should have seen years ago. He said I messed up. His voice cracked a little. He said I should have listened to you. I should have protected you. I let my past blur the way I see the present, and I let you carry pain I should have shouldered right beside you. His eyes were red. Mine were tired. I told him quietly that understanding too late was still better than not understanding at all, but I also told him something else. I told him that respect was not a gift, it was a responsibility, and I should not have to fight for basic kindness in my own marriage. He nodded and whispered, I know. Then he said the thing that surprised me the most. He said, you do not have to forgive me right now. I want to do the work. I want to understand every way I failed you and fix it. And if you still choose to leave after that, then I will accept it. But please give me the chance to be the husband you deserved all along." His voice was trembling. My heart was tired but not hardened. I told him I would give him time, not a promise, not a guarantee, just time, because healing did not come from one apology. It came from actions, from daily choices, from a person showing who they really were when no one was watching. I needed to see that version of him before making any decision. He nodded again and said he understood. Then he told me something else, something I never thought I would hear. He said he had already called Lisa and told her she would not be joining us for Christmas dinner. He told her he needed to focus on his marriage and support his wife instead of dragging her into old wounds. I did not expect that. I did not even ask for it. For the first time, it felt like he had chosen me without hesitation. The next morning, when the sunlight touched the living room carpet, Mark was already in the kitchen making coffee. He looked nervous, but he smiled gently at me. He asked if he could sit with me. I nodded. We talked not about blame, not about anger. We talked about years of overlooked feelings and quiet sacrifices. We talked about the times he dismissed my hurt because he did not understand it, and the times I stayed silent because I did not want to start a fight during already stressful moments. It was the first time we had spoken like two adults who wanted the same thing. A future that felt steady. A future where both people mattered. Over the next week, Mark changed in small ways, but they were meaningful. He helped around the house without being asked. He listened when I spoke, even when the topic made him uncomfortable. He checked in on me during the day. He apologized more than once, but never in a dramatic way. Just simple, sincere, "I am sorry for the part of me that could not see you clearly." Christmas Eve arrived and the house felt calm for the first time in a long while. We prepared dinner together. He chopped vegetables. I stirred the soup. Music played softly in the background. Not the loud kind that tried to hide tension, just something gentle. When we finally sat down to eat, he held my hand and asked if I was okay. I looked at him for a long moment and said, "I am getting there." And he smiled as if that was enough for now. After dinner, he handed me a small box, nothing fancy, no shiny paper. Inside was a simple bracelet with one tiny charm shaped like a small steady flame. I asked him, "What does it mean?" He said, "It is for your courage, for every quiet fire you carried while you kept this home together. You deserve to know your strength." My throat tightened. That was the first time he had ever seen me fully. We still had more to fix, more to rebuild, but in that moment I realized something important. Sometimes courage was not loud, it was not dramatic, it was the gentle strength of a woman choosing herself even when it scared her. It was the bravery to speak truth even when her voice shook. It was the quiet decision to allow healing, but never at the cost of her self-respect. And for the first time, I felt proud of the woman I had become. The days after Christmas moved slowly like soft winter clouds drifting across a quiet sky. I was still carrying pieces of hurt inside me, but they no longer felt sharp, more like old memories that needed gentle sorting. Mark kept his distance just enough to give me space, yet stayed close enough to show he truly wanted to rebuild what he had almost broken. One evening I was sitting on the front porch wrapped in my thick sweater. The air felt crisp and touched my cheeks with a cold sting, but my heart felt strangely warm. I watched cars pass by and listened to the sound of dry leaves brushing against the sidewalk. Sometimes it was nice to be still, to breathe without thinking of who needed me or what I had to fix next. Mark stepped outside slowly. He held 2 cups of hot cocoa and set one on the rail beside me. He did not sit right away. He waited like he was asking permission without using words. I nodded and he quietly sat next to me. For a moment we just listened to the distant hum of the neighborhood. Then he said softly, "I have been thinking a lot." I sipped my cocoa and waited. He said, "I always thought being a good husband meant providing and keeping the bills paid and making sure we looked like a stable couple to everyone around us. But somewhere along the way, I forgot something important. I forgot that being present mattered more than being perfect. I forgot to protect your heart the way you protected mine." His voice had no ego this time, no defensiveness, just a man facing himself honestly. I took a breath and told him I needed him to understand that I had waited for years to feel seen. I told him I did not want a marriage where I felt small. I wanted a partnership where my feelings were not something he remembered only after hurting me. He nodded and said, I know. I am learning, I am listening. I want to keep listening. The honesty between us felt uncomfortable but necessary, kind of like washing a wound before it can heal. The next week felt different, not perfect, but different. When he came home from work, he asked how my day was, and he actually listened. He helped fold laundry even though he used to hate it. He cooked dinner twice and burned one meal, but we laughed about it instead of arguing. Small changes but meaningful ones. One afternoon, I finally visited my sister who lived across town. She knew something had been wrong, but I had been too tired to explain everything before. When I walked into her kitchen, she hugged me tight and held me for a long moment. She said she had missed me and asked if I was okay. I told her everything, slow and steady, about the Christmas dinner, about Lisa showing up, about the way I felt invisible, about the moment I finally stood up for myself. She held my hands and said, I am proud of you. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is demand the love she gives so freely. Hearing those words made my chest loosen, maybe because deep down I knew she was right. When I drove back home that evening, the sky was painted with soft purple and orange streaks, the kind of sunset that whispers hope even when life feels messy. I sat in the car for a moment before going inside. I realized something important right then. I was not fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my peace and letting my marriage rise or fall based on whether it could honor that. When I walked inside, Mark was kneeling on the living room floor, fixing the loose leg of the coffee table. A small thing, but for some reason it touched me. Maybe because it showed he was paying attention to the little details again, something he had not done in years. He looked up and asked, do you want to go on a walk with me after I finish this? Not a demand, not an expectation, just a gentle invitation. We walked around the neighborhood slowly. The streetlights glowed softly and the air had that crisp winter chill that makes you walk a little closer. We talked about small things. The neighbor's new dog, the funny way our mailbox leaned to one side, the way the world felt quieter after the holidays. Halfway down the block, he stopped and turned to me. He said, I do not want to lose you. Not because I am scared of being alone, but because I finally understand how much you mean. I want to be better, not to keep you, but because you deserve a husband who shows up every day with respect and love. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I believed that he meant every word. Not because he wanted forgiveness, but because he wanted to grow. I told him gently, I am not promising the end of this story yet. But I am willing to see where this path leads if you keep choosing honesty and kindness. He nodded. His eyes softened. He whispered, thank you. When we reached home, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally saw something real. Not pretty words, not last-minute apologies. Effort. And effort is the true language of love. Later that night, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked tired but peaceful. My heart felt steady. I realized that I was no longer the woman who stayed quiet to keep the peace. I was the woman who learned how to protect her own heart and speak her own truth. And that was the bravest thing I had ever done, and little by little life started to feel different. Not perfect, not magical, just real, and sometimes real was more than enough. The new year began with a quiet morning sky that looked soft and pale, like it's giving the world a fresh start. I stood by the kitchen window holding a warm cup of tea between my hands. The steam brushed my face gently. Mark was still asleep, and for the first time in months I felt my chest rise and fall without heaviness. The truth was simple. Healing does not arrive all at once. It comes in slow waves, some gentle, some rough. But it comes when a woman finally chooses herself. Later that morning, Mark walked into the kitchen with sleepy eyes and hair sticking up in every possible direction. He smiled in a shy way, like he was still learning how to show affection again. He whispered, good morning. I answered softly, good morning. We stood there for a moment, just breathing in the still, calm air. No tension, no fear, no pretending. He asked if I wanted to have breakfast at the little cafe near the river, the same place we had gone years ago when we were newly married and still learning each other. I agreed, and we drove there while soft sunlight painted gold across the windshield. Inside the cafe, the smell of fresh bread filled the room. A waitress showed us to a small table by the window. As I sat down, I remembered the young woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant holding on no matter how heavy things got. But the woman sitting there now was different. This woman believed love also meant drawing lines, speaking truth, demanding respect, protecting her heart like it was worth something sacred. And it was. After we ordered, Mark held the napkin in his hands like he was gathering courage. Finally, he said, "I know we still have a long way to go. I know I hurt you deeply, but I want you to know something. I am not trying to win you back with nice days or small moments. I want to become the man who never puts you second again." His voice was steady, not dramatic, not rushed, real. I told him gently that trust needed time, that I could not promise the ending yet, but I also told him that I saw his effort. Not just in words, but in actions. And that mattered to me in ways he would never fully understand. When we finished breakfast, we walked along the river. The water moved slowly with little ripples glowing under the winter sun. I slipped my hands into my coat pockets and felt the cold air brush across my face. Mark walked beside me quietly without trying to rush the silence. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. He finally said, "When I told you that Lisa was coming to Christmas, I truly did not think about how it would make you feel. I was careless, thoughtless, stuck in old patterns. But when I saw the look in your eyes that night, I realized how blind I had been." I nodded, not to agree with him, but to acknowledge the truth in his words. I said I never wanted a battle. I wanted a partner. I wanted someone who stood beside me, not behind old feelings or old stories. And he said, "I am learning how to be that partner now." We kept walking until the wind grew colder and we headed back home. Inside the house, the glow of the afternoon sun made everything feel soft and warm. I sat on the couch and watched the lights settle on the Christmas ornaments we had still not taken down. They sparkled like tiny reminders of everything we had survived. Mark sat across from me with a gentle look in his eyes. He said, "I need you to know something." I asked, "What is it?" He took a slow breath. He said, "Even if you choose to leave one day, I will still be grateful for the way you loved me, but I will spend every day hoping I can give that love back in a way that never makes you question your worth again." Those words touched something deep inside me, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. The next several weeks moved with small, steady steps. He kept listening. He kept helping. He kept showing up in ways he never had before, not to erase the past, but to build a better future. And little by little, my heart opened again, not wide, not blindly, just enough to breathe easy and feel safe. One night as we prepared dinner together, he reached for my hand and held it gently. He said, "You are the strongest person I know." And for the first time, I believed him. Because strength is not about how loudly a woman fights. Sometimes strength is the quiet decision to walk away from disrespect. Sometimes it is the courage to demand better. And sometimes it is the grace to allow someone to grow when they finally choose to grow. Months passed. Our home felt lighter, our conversations deeper, our connection slowly rebuilt with honesty where silence used to live. We still had work to do, but we were doing it together this time. One warm spring evening, I stood on the porch, watching the sky fade into soft shades of blue. Mark stepped beside me and gently took my hand. He whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance." I whispered, "Thank you for learning how to love me the right way." In that moment, I realized something important. This was not a story about a woman saving her marriage. This was a story about a woman saving herself first. And because she did that, everything else finally began to heal. Life is not perfect now, but it is honest, it is real, and it is ours. And sometimes that is the most beautiful ending a woman can choose.